In today's W analysis, why journalism matters. In the late 1800s, lynchings were the lay of the land. The half-hearted efforts of the Reconstruction era created a new disease called white fragility, which is basically white people who get upset at the progress of black people, regardless of how minimal the progress is. The disease ran so rampant in the South that Southerners were still licking their wounds from having their asses handed to them during the Civil War. With national embarrassment and depleted bank accounts hovering over Southern whites, they took out their frustrations on the most vulnerable, defenseless of citizens, newly freed black people. Crusade for Justice, the autobiography of Ida B. Wells, speaks to the journalistic onslaught from Queen Ida as she spoke out against the origin and horrors of lynchings. I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge white abolitionists for their sacrifice and efforts in bringing forth an equal and unified society here on American soil. While I believe there's a number of issues in the black community that can only be solved by the black community, the cleansing of corruption and perversion in the American government is an all-hands-on-deck matter. So if you're a white person of today who sympathizes with the abolitionists of the past, the rest of this reel isn't aimed your way. I used the word perversion earlier as the United States government continues to prove itself the guardian and hub for Epstein apologists and clientele. It's important that we look at how Ida B. Wells used her pen and platform to curtail the lustful and dangerous ways of the Northern liberal and Southern conservative. Throughout the book, they're interchangeable, referred to as the press or the public. So let me give a little bit more context. Again, it's the late 1800s, and while the lustful and ungodly nature of the Southern white man saw him rape several thousands of black slaves, be them man, woman, or child, the simple thought of his pretty precious white woman craving black backstrokes was just too much for this Southern white man to bear. How in the world could his pretty, precious, perfect white woman ever crave the touch, thrust, and stroke of a black man? This type of delusion of the Southern white man's part led to the most barbaric level of violence, lynchings. This level of cruelty knew no bounds. Black men, women, and children would be stripped, castrated, stoned, burned alive, then ultimately hanged. The Southern white man was so devilish in his ways that the entire town even canceled schools and work just so everyone could publicly see the lynchings occur. And if you couldn't get out of school in time, no problem. The corpse of the body would be dragged around town, with onlookers taking severed parts of the body off as souvenirs. Now, back to the press and the pulpit. The press, similar to today's mainstream media, was complicit in either the cover-up or the justification of these lynchings. If they weren't running false propaganda on the sexual natures of black people to scare or enrage the local whites, they would often presume guilt on the lynch despite no evidence to support their claims. Now, the pulpit and churches in general were already segregated. The black church served as a safe haven during these times. However, white churches were passively condoning the violence, as many of the churches would aid and abet the lynchers, seeing how many, if not all of them, sat in their congregations. Ida B. Wells took note of all this, literally. No other outlet was speaking about the lynchings. Ida saw how many of the lynching victims were falsely accused, set up, or simply mistaken for someone else, and yet no one was doing any or saying anything on the matter. Black people couldn't fend for themselves because, again, if I'm falsely accused, what white judge, jury, and executioner is going to believe me? The Northern liberal thought they had done enough for the newly freed people, and so Ida hoisted the responsibilities of telling these stories by herself. Again, I'll reiterate, Ida did this essentially by herself. She was invited overseas a number of times to speak on the lack of life, lack of liberty, and lack of pursuing happiness for the common black person in the States. The book is filled with her archives, entries, and documents of this lynching of that 12-year-old boy, or that lynching and castration of a black man, or the time when white people put a black woman in a box full of nails and rolled her down a hill to her death. Despite the sorrowness of her work and the constant threats on her life, Ida remained diligent with her pen. She would go on to establish several women and civic organizations aiming at making the life of black women and black people better. And because she was a black woman, her work wouldn't be fully appreciated and recognized until 89 years after her death in 2020, when she was honored with a special edition Pulitzer Prize. In a time when the American government is filled with Sodom and Gomorrah behavior, true journalism is desperately necessary. These people in power will use the media to make you hate victims and sympathize with perpetrators. But in the spirit of Crusade for Justice, the autobiography of Ida B. Wells, just remember that your actions, be them public or between you and God, will always live in your conscience. Like if you enjoyed this segment, share if it can benefit others, subscribe for more book-related content. Till then, stay in the book and stay out the way.